Robinhood has said it's received an SEC warning that the trading platform could face an enforcement action related to its U.S. crypto business. Shares are lower right now, although they've been bouncing around, but there are some concerns. One analyst, though, says the news may be a little overblown. That analyst is Dan Dolev, Mizuho America's senior financial technology analyst. Dan, it's good to see you. As I mentioned, the shares have been bouncing around here. Now, typically, news comes out about what's called a Wells notice from the Securities and Exchange Commission, and a stock goes down because it's usually seen as bad news. Now, the stock was higher earlier, now it's lower, but why should people not be alarmed in your view?
Hey, thanks for having me. Typically, yes, not in crypto. In crypto, everything is different.
They're used to it.
We're used to it, exactly. Good news is bad news. No, but the reason the stock is actually not going down and the reason we say there's no reason to be worried is because this is not new news. As far back as 2 years ago, if you go back to their 10K, the annual report, they've said that they've been subpoenaed by the SEC for some of these issues. So basically, the SEC has decided to take action on something that they've been calling out like 2 years ago. So this has been in the making. If you look at the exposure of Robinhood to crypto, it's only like 7% of revenue and like 15% of assets under custody. And, those tokens, ex Bitcoin, ex Ether, ex Dogecoin, the exposure is very minimal. And last, the reaction on Coinbase, Coinbase tripled since the Wells notice last year. So, the market clearly, is shrugging it off, so to say. So we're saying there's no real reason to be worried.
And Dan, do you have a sense of sort of timeline here? What happens next?
Look, I'm not a legal expert, but from looking at some of the other stuff around there, like Kraken and some of the other exchanges, I think that at worst case scenario, it's probably, again, this is just speaking of the layman. It's because it looks like it's not new news, and I'm looking at some prior cases. There could be like some sort of like a settlement or something. I don't see this as being, and the market's clearly agreeing with that. So timeline. This could take a little while, but I think the results, the fundamentals of Robinhood are so good that I think this is going to remain as a little bug bite, not more than that.
When you look at a situation like that with Coinbase, which has a much more combative or sort of at least publicly combative relationship with the SEC and with regulators, do you think Robinhood has sort of had the advantage of sort of almost drafting behind Coinbase to some extent, right? Let Coinbase fight the fight, and we'll kind of do our own thing here. So in that sense, also, is the Wells notice more of a sort of unexpected?
It's actually a great point that you're making, because they've been the good guy. Robinhood has been the good guy. And I think they, voluntarily since day one agreed to, not play in those, let's say, riskier tokens, right? That could be considered securities, and said, we're staying in the, things that are considered commodities, like, Bitcoin or Dogecoin, whatever the SEC does not think is like a big risk. So I actually think that not fighting the SEC and being the good guy is going to help Robinhood in the long term, and not fighting it like Coinbase does.
And Dan, for Robinhood, earnings are on deck here Wednesday. What do you expect to hear?
So we think it's going to be a stellar quarter. We just published our preview today, just coincidence, like we didn't know this was coming, obviously. But I think consensus is, grossly understating revenues. There's going to be a massive, significant beat to revenues and margin. The best news you're going to hear, again, in my view, is you're going to hear a lot more MAUs, monthly average users, coming out of Europe, because this is kind of the surprise element, the traction they're getting in Europe. And all the success they're having in this Robinhood Gold, which is deposits coming in, gaining share from the likes of Schwab in terms of assets coming in from people because they're offering 3% match on your IRA. So a lot of these good things, they're going to start gaining scale this quarter, and it's going to be a phenomenal quarter with great guidance for the year.
Dan, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.